Well, today is October the 27th, 2019, and we have the great privilege of having Mom with us for a few weeks. And so I thought I'd take the chance to ask Mom some more questions and get some more of her deep, dark secrets out. No. I guess what I was wondering about is if you could. I think the memory of people in our family who have already passed on will be fading pretty rapidly, and people that I didn't really even know that well, or I knew and when I was younger and who've passed away. And so I was thinking maybe that I'd like to talk about the Gilmores and the Hesters, but maybe go back a little ways and get some of the some memories you have about. Maybe we could just start out with Grandma and Granddad, your mom and dad, and just a little bit about them as far as what they were like, and where did they grow up. And I know they weren't perfect, and I know they had some challenges and difficulties, but that's my grandparents and my kids' great grandparents, and Callie's great grandparents, and you knew them.
Yeah, I knew them.
And so it might be nice to have that information, a little bit about. Why don't you just start out telling me a little bit about Grandma Flo, and if you recall anything that you ever heard about her childhood, or.
Yeah, a few things. Mother and her brother Joe were born in Lancaster, Ohio. That's where Grandma and Grandma Palmer and Granddad Bennett were from. And how they met, I don't know. But I know grandmother was Catholic. Granddad Bennett was not. And there was a little difficulty with the priest there in Lancaster because the Catholic grade school was clear across town, cold there in the winter, and the public school was just a few blocks from their home. And the priest said she will go to a Catholic school, and Granddad Bennett said she will not. And there was quite a bit of trouble there.
Mm-hmm.
And so Mother went to public school, and I don't know how faithful Grandmother Bennett was after that, but it slowly deteriorated through the years. Now, Mother was...
Did you ever... No, Grandpa Bennett passed away.
My Granddad Bennett died when I was about 4 years old.
Do you remember him?
Oh, yes. I was the delight of his life. I was the only grandchild.
What was he like? Do you have, what's your memory of him?
I can remember him being tall, and he wore a cap all the time. In fact, they called him Cap. I think he was bald-headed, and I think that's why he wore a cap all the time. But when Mother and I were down there visiting, I'd watch for him every night to come home, and I'd watch out the window, and I'd see a car coming down the street, and I can remember this. I'd say, "Pampa," and it didn't stop, and I'd say, "No." Pretty soon that Pampa and that car stopped, and it was my Pampa, and he just loved me. He'd pick me up and play with me and hold me, and I can just remember he was tall.
Now, was that memory, did you say they were visiting you?
Mother and I were down there visiting.
In Lancaster?
No, I'm sorry. they moved to Arkansas City, Kansas, when Mother was young. And the family in Ohio had a fit, said the Indians would kill them. But Granddad wanted to work in the oil fields.
Now, you say Arkansas
Kansas City.
City.
Arkansas City, and many times it's called Ark City.
Ark City, and it was in Kansas, not Arkansas.
No, it was in Kansas.
Okay.
Below Wichita.
Okay.
Rather close to the Oklahoma line.
How did you and Grandma get down there?
On the train. We took the train from Craig to Kansas City, and we had to change trains there to go on down to Arkansas City.
Do you have any idea how many hours that took, or days? Or?
No, it seemed like a long time, but I loved it. I loved riding on the train.
Yeah.
And I loved eating in the eating compartment, whatever you call that now.
Yeah.
I just thought that was,
Yeah.
well, that was life at the top of the hill, you know. And I was very little. And Mother said the conductors and what have you used to make over me. I guess there wasn't any of the little kid on the train. I don't know.
How old would have Grandma Flo been that time?
Well, in her 20s. I can't exactly. She was born in 1911, and I was born in 32, and was very, very young the first time or two we went down there.
So I'm guessing that he had not retired yet
No,
when he passed away.
but he was not working in the oil fields as he had been. I don't know what he was doing, but he came home every night.
Yeah. Was he dressed up when he came home, or?
No, I don't remember what he had on. I don't think it was overalls,
Yeah.
and I don't think it was jeans, but he wasn't dressed with a shirt and tie anyway.
Now remind me, we probably talked about this, but how did, well, tell me about Grandma Bennett. I remember her.
Yes, you remember her. She was a short gal, probably about 5 foot, just about my
I called her
height.
Grandma Bailey.
Yes.
Great Grandma Bailey.
Yes.
After
After
Grandpa.
Grandpa died, now they were friends with Hollis and Chloe Bailey. Chloe also was ill. And just a short time before Grandpa died, Hollis and Chloe came over to Grandma and Grandpa's, and Grandpa was lying on the couch.
Did he have cancer or what?
I'm not sure, Chuck. I'm not sure.
But
He
they knew he was dying.
They knew he was very ill. But Chloe said to Grandpa, said, Lee, get up off that couch. I'm sicker than you are. And then he died such a short time later. She felt really, really bad about that. And she died, I don't know how long, not terribly long after Grandpa did. And there were still 2 girls. She and Hollis still had 2 teenage girls at home. So I guess he and Anna Mae got together and they got married.
Well, now how long did that last? Because he had died by the time I was young. I don't ever remember meeting Grandpa Bailey or meeting Granddad Bailey, Great Granddad Bailey.
Yeah, but you were very young. He and Grandma were at Mother's and Daddy's at one time. But you were very, very young, so you wouldn't have remembered him. And they didn't come up a lot because it was a hard trip from down at Ark City. And I can't remember the year he died. I just don't remember. And I called her Grandma Bailey then, but to me, she's Grandma Bennett.
Yeah. Well, what did he pass away from? Do you know?
Probably heart, but I'm not sure. He also had worked in the oil fields.
Did she ever move from there, or because I only remember her in Kansas City?
She came to mother and daddy's frequently, and stayed at lengthy periods. You know, that new addition they put on the house when
Mhm.
Johnny Mike died, they
Yeah.
were making it, and that's where she would stay.
I see.
And she was there a considerably length of time,
Yeah.
and then went back home. It wasn't. It wasn't always good having her there. She kind of used to interfere with Daddy, and Daddy didn't like interference. Although he and Grandma Bennett or Bailey had always been close.
Yeah.
But it was different with her living there.
Well, how did she pass away? Do you remember when?
She had heart trouble. She died in February when you turned 18, I think, because I went down to the funeral, and to do that, I had to miss your 18th birthday. And I felt really bad about that. But Judy's first husband, my sister Judy, her first husband, Kenny Moore, drove us down.
Mm-hmm.
And thought we ought to be with Mother. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Well, then,
Anyway, you wanted to know about Grandma Bailey Bennett, what she was like. She was a bouncy, feisty little thing. And Granddad Bennett used to, he'd get up in the mornings, and he'd get her up, and he'd get her going, and he was a terrible tease. And as soon as he could get her bouncing around and kind of aggravated, he'd go lay down and go back to sleep. She was a wonderful housekeeper, wonderful cook, and she was left-handed.
oh,
Yeah, and my mother ended up being able to use the left hand almost as well as the right because of her mother being left-handed. And Grandma, she did beautiful handwork. Embroidery work that looked like it was done by a machine. Beautiful. Women in her stage of life, that's what they did.
You remember she was so she was Catholic when she was young.
Yes, and then and Mother was not brought up in the Catholic Church, but really almost in no church.
Yeah.
Grandma then later on joined the Baptist church there in Ark City. Her neighbor was a Baptist, and I think used to have her go to church with her, and that's where Grandma was buried from, or the funeral was in a Baptist church.
Are there any positive qualities that you are aware of in your mom's life, or in your life even, that you feel like you derive from knowing those people?
Well, I don't know if you call it positive qualities or not, but there were proper way to do things and improper way to do things. When you hung the clothes on the line to dry, all the colors had to be together. Like when you hung the towels up, all the same colors together. And when you took things down, you folded them right then and put them in the basket. And you had to have good white sheets and things so the neighbors wouldn't think that you didn't know how to have a whitewash.
Oh, I see.
And my mother was the same way. And to an extent, I have been too, and I used to hang up clothes. I couldn't do it any other way because I'd been taught that way. You know? I was never the housekeeper that Grandma Bennett was, and she could cook a meal and have the pots and pans and everything done when she put the dishes on the table.
Hmm.
I don't know how she ever did it. I never was able to do it. And Mother had me to help. So I don't know that she was able to do it either. But there was a proper way to set the table, a proper way to behave at the table, and my dad was the same way. There were things you did not do at the table. You didn't giggle, and you didn't put your elbows on the table, and you didn't lean on the table, and
Mm-hmm.
you had manners.
So you got that from Granddad then?
Both.
From your dad?
Yeah, my dad and mother and
Mhm.
grandmother.
Well, I remember they were pretty strict around the dinner table.
Oh
but
yes, oh yes, they were very strict. It used to make me pretty nervous to eat down there in their dining room,
Yeah.
and they had a new rug,
Yeah,
you know, and we used to put papers down.
Underneath us, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I remember that too. Didn't bother me.
No, you kids were really little, and that was just normal there at Grandma's.
Yeah. All right, so Grandma and Granddad, Hester, I guess that's John. He's John Zimmerai?
John Zimmerai and Christina Hilsenbeck.
Christina Hilsenbeck Hester. So, what's your earliest memory of them?
Oh, very young. The folks my mother and dad had moved to Kansas City not long after they were married. I think the refineries closed or something, and Daddy didn't have any work down there. And then worked
What do you mean? They were living down in
in
Arkansas?
Ark City. They ran away and got married.
Okay.
And I don't know when they finally announced it. They
Yeah.
never told me. But the refineries closed. Wasn't any work in that. It was a small town.
Yeah.
They went to Kansas City, and Daddy had periodic work, nothing really steady.
Yeah.
And they finally, when I was maybe 8, 9 months old or something, I was born in Kansas City. We moved back up to Mound City, where his parents lived. And there's a picture of me as a baby with Granddad Hester's mother.
Hmm. Really?
Yes, on a blanket in the yard. Yeah.
So that would have been
30.
your great grandmother then.
Yeah, my great
And
grandmother.
what was her name?
Well, she had been a Hester, and then her husband, Robert Hester, died. She raised her children and married this John Derm then from Mound City, and they had a greenhouse there. And I remember, he was gone, but I remember grandmother taking me through the greenhouse and their plants and everything
I
that
see.
they had. And she had her maiden name had been Kiger from Mound City, or Oregon, there someplace.
Okay.
She had red hair.
Oregon, Missouri.
Yes, Oregon, Missouri. She'd had red hair, and as she got older, it turned darker, and when it should have turned gray, she died with black hair. And in this picture of her and me on the blanket, she had black hair.
How about that?
And she died in 1938 or 9, something like that, right about the time Judith Lee was born, I think. Anyway, I used to go over to Grandma's and stay in Grandpa's sometimes.
And they were in Mound City,
City.
not Craig.
No, they were in Mound City. We lived at Craig. Granddad helped Daddy buy a creamery and egg and poultry business over there, which is what Granddad had, and Daddy worked in that ever since he was a little bitty kid.
Yeah.
He'd go and work at noon while Granddad went to eat. Then from school, Daddy would go. Where was my mind going?
Well, you were just talking about you'd stay with Grandma.
Oh, I'd stay with Grandma every now and then, maybe for a week or so. and she taught me how to put the clothes through the wringer and how to do it without getting my fingers up there and my arms in the wringer.
Now, were the ringers powered at that time? Or were they
She had an electric machine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Electric wringer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You
And-
wrung them out, and then you would hang them up.
Yeah, you put them through the wringer into the rinse water,
Oh, okay.
and then and when I was really young, 2 rinses, and through the wringer each time,
Yeah.
then into the basket, then out to hang them up.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite a complicated task to do laundry.
And what was her personality like?
She was very sweet to me, not a huggy, cuddly.
You know, she's German, right?
She was German, but she was very sweet, very kind, and I loved being with her,
Yeah.
loved being around her. I loved staying over there.
Why? Other than that she was very nice to you.
Yeah, I know it was just
Staying at Grandma's.
staying at Grandma's.
Yeah.
And there was a swing on the front porch that I loved, and their yard always had a croquet set up, and had ever since Daddy was a little kid. And Grandma knew when to put new grass seed out so that they'd have nice grass all summer long for the croquet players. And it was so fun to watch them play croquet. And you didn't ever want to play with my dad. He would kill you every time. He always won.
He was a competitor, huh?
He always, from the time he was a little guy, he was a competitor. And I liked going down to the station. Granddad had right there as you now come in off of I-29 into Mound City. That's where his station was.
Oh.
He had the filling station, and he had the creamery, and he had the
Now, this is your dad or Granddad?
No, Granddad. And that's why he helped Daddy get into the same business over in Craig. Because this is what Daddy knew.
Yeah.
And that's when we moved to Craig. I guess I was a year or so. I don't know. And that's where their Robert was born and died the day he was born.
I see.
He was early. Couldn't breathe.
So, Granddad Hester, what was he like, personality-wise?
John?
Yeah.
Well, always kind and always good. And he used to take me sometimes by the hand down the street and buy me an ice cream cone. And that was a treat because money, it was in the Depression, money was close.
Yeah.
And I remember Aunt Ethel telling me when she went to Maryville to school that she always thought Grandma was the generous one with her, but Grandpa every now and then would send her 25 cents. Now that was a lot of money then. And it surprised her because she didn't expect it of him.
So you'd consider him a generous man.
Yes. Generous,
Well, he's thoughtful to his
sweet,
family.
loving, without being demonstrative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed being with the two of them. And they in that house in Mound City, which they had built, and which grandmother's father, Fritz Hilsenbeck, had plastered. He was a plasterer and had done all that work on. He'd helped them.
When you say plaster, or are you talking
He did
about?
plaster work on houses. Houses were built, and we didn't have drywall, and they put plaster up on
On
the
walls?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And then painted them or papered them
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah. And he did that for his own
His
home?
living, he did that for a living.
Who did?
Hilsenbeck,
Oh,
Fritz.
Grandpa.
Yeah, my great,
Great-grandpa. Did you know him?
no. I have pictures of him and grandmother Hilsenbeck,
Yeah.
but I never knew them.
And did he do that for the married couple, or he
He,
had done it for that? Oh, they had that home built, and he did the plastering.
yes, and I presume they paid him. Now, Daddy said he stayed there doing it, but he slept in the attic. Now, why Grandma made him sleep in the attic, I don't know, but that's where he slept. But what I wanted to tell you was downstairs, there was the parlor, and then there was a dining room, and on the other side off of the parlor was their little den, and then the kitchen back there, and I loved that den. I loved it. And in the closet was a doll, a ceramic doll that had belonged to Aunt Jeannie, the youngest. And grandmother let me play with that doll because she knew I wouldn't break it. But she wouldn't let, when my cousin Beverly was a little older than me, she wouldn't let her play with it. But I got to play with it.
And Beverly was whose child?
Aunt Helen's, Dick Sutherland's older sister, his sister.
Okay.
Beverly Sutherland,
Okay.
Ellen in Orville. She was a school teacher, and then he later sold books. That's where I learned to read. They had all these books in their home.
And this was Helen's husband?
Uncle Orville.
Helen was the oldest child of
There was Helen.
John and
Yes,
John and Christina.
And Christina. There's Helen, and then Robert, then Clyde, Ethel, and Dorothy Jean, but she went by Jeannie. I liked going to Grandma's. I really did. And to show you what small towns are like, my sister Judy, when she was this really little and our telephone was on the wall there at Craig, she had to get up, push a chair over there, get up on the chair, and you run the phone by hand, and she said, I want to talk to my grandma. She didn't say Grandma Hester, Mound City, which was long distance, anything. I want to talk to my grandma. And they knew exactly who was calling and who to plug into in Mound City. And she got to talk to her grandma.
How about that?
That's the way, yeah. There was a telephone operator over there in that little telephone place, and she knew exactly because it lit up with our number.
Yeah.
And she knew who her
the
grandma
Hesters
was.
were.
Yeah. Yeah. Mother always thought that was funny. Of course, it wasn't funny money-wise because it cost money to call over there.
It did, huh?
Yes. Yes.
So when you said that great-granddad Hester, John, helped Granddad get started in Craig, how did that, what do you mean? Did he
loaned him
finance
the
it?
money.
He loaned him the money.
$500. And of course, Daddy paid every penny back. Every penny. And I can remember.
How long did it take him to pay him back? Do you have an idea?
I don't have any idea, Chuck.
Did he charge him interest?
I doubt it. Daddy loaned us money one time and he didn't charge us interest. $500, and we had to pay every penny back on a house that we thought we were buying. And the lady, it turned out, had sold that same house to about 9 of us.
I remember that time.
Yes.
That's when we were we were looking for a place.
We lived on 19th.
We lived on 19th, and we were looking for a place.
A bigger place.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense.
And it was a 2-story place, and we liked it, and it was kind of back out of the way and across from the railroad track that ran, which isn't there anymore.
We sold it multiple times.
Yeah, 9 times we found out. So we lost the house, lost the money, and had to pay Daddy back. He said, I'm sorry, kids, but this was the deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so Granddad got his start with the loan from his dad.
His
and
dad. Hmm.
How long did he have that store before he got out of that?
Oh my.
Did he
Check.
name it after his name, or was it a John Hester
No,
and
it's
Son?
Hester and Son.
Hester and Son.
And then, and he had, in those days, farmers' feed it had to be ground
I see.
when they came to buy it. And down on the corner from the store, he had the feed store. And it caught fire one night when I was probably 5 or 6 or something. It caught fire and burned. And so from then on, he ground the feed in the back of the store he had. And he started then building, he wanted to build a grocery store.
Yeah.
He wanted a grocery store. And he wanted, which was very rare in those days, a locker plant, they called them. And he wanted a room, a cooler to hang the beef in to age it before they butchered it.
Yeah.
And I know he went to Oregon, Missouri and checked, I think, a locker plant out there. We came to St. Joe and Safeway stores and what have you. He checked out the layout of them. He wanted it where people had baskets and could go help themselves, where you didn't have to go wait on that person.
Right.
And he built it out of brick and attached it to the other spot there.
Did he physically build it himself?
No, had it built. No, well, he didn't have time anyway.
Yeah.
And
But he wasn't a handyman.
not so as you could notice.
Yeah.
No. He wasn't, but he knew how he wanted things done.
Right.
I'll tell you.
Yeah.
And we lived out in the country for a couple of years, about a half a mile out of town. He wanted to try some pig feed and stuff before he sold it. He wanted to see how it worked.
Yeah.
So we had some pigs and a couple of Jersey cows. They grew not hay, but I can't think of it.
Alfalfa.
Alfalfa, yeah, alfalfa. They grew that, and Mother had a garden. We had no electricity, and we had no running water. So that was an experience.
Mm.
Anyway, he finished the store, and he bought a car. We finally had a car, not just that old truck to run around in. And right, just several months or so before World War II started.
Mm. And you would have been around
I was
8 or something.
I was 11 when the war started.
11, okay, 41 or 40,
Yeah,
December 41.
December 7th, 41. Yeah. And in January, they went to Kansas City for a weekend or something. And when they came back on the train. And I said, "Where's the car?" Daddy said, "I sold it because I knew there'd be gas rationing, tire rationing, and I didn't want people to think I was taking more than what was
Everybody
my
else
right."
was doing, yeah.
Yeah.
And this was after the war started then.
Yes. A month or so after the war started. Yeah. So we were down. He had a tank wagon, as they called it, where he delivered gas out in the country to the farmers.
Yeah.
And that's what we drove around in. If we had to go to St. Joe, he would borrow a car or something.
Mm-hmm.
If it was, or we'd ride the train, Mother and I. Yeah.
What would you go to St. Joe for?
Shopping. You couldn't buy clothing and shoes and stuff in Craig.
I see.
We'd go to St. Joe for shopping.
So, what kinds of, let's back up, and I can't remember if we talked about this initially, probably did, but do you know how Granddad and Grandma met Robert and Hester, Robert and Florence,
Bob and Florence.
how they first met?
Yes. Daddy and a friend of his from Mound City had gone to Parkville College for their freshman year.
Yeah.
And his friend said they have,
Parkville was
Job.
where?
well, outside of Kansas City, along the Missouri River there.
Do you know why they chose Parkville?
It was close. I don't know why they chose it instead of Maryville,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people went to Maryville, but these two boys decided they'd go to Parkville.
Yeah.
And in those days, it was a Presbyterian college,
Mm-hmm.
which I used to go to youth conference there.
Yeah.
So this friend of Daddy's, well, Daddy worked in Colorado at a resort there. I can't. I know it as well as anything. I can't remember it. He worked there all summer. He started out as I think a bellboy, and slept on a cot in the back of the hotel, and ended up being the boss there before he left. And they went to
What kind of boss? What do you mean? He ran the
the head
desk?
the
or-
head bell guy.
I
Yeah,
see.
had a room
So
then.
he was a bellman then.
Yeah, he had a
So
room
what
then.
would it be like? You mean like Aspen or like Park?
Keep talking.
Some peak, something peak, Pikes Peak,
No,
um,
I've been through there. I know it. Well, anyway, I think he worked there his first summer out of school.
So he became the head bellman.
Oh yeah. Oh yes, because he made sure that he did extra for the guests, and the what have you, and they just kept promoting him. So then they went to Park College, and then this fellow knew that there was work in the refineries down there by Arkansas City,
Yeah.
and they went down there. And the boarding house they stayed at,
This is in the summertime.
yeah, after the first year at Parkville.
Parkville College.
Right. The boarding house they stayed in, Mother's girlfriend's mother ran it.
Hmm.
So of course Mother was there quite often with her friend,
Yeah.
and that's how they met. And the other two also married, and they were friends for years. I think it was the Higbees. I don't. Whether you
I
remember
remember
them?
Higbees.
Yeah.
They were, now who were the Higbees?
Well, her
Did that story-
girlfriend married this Higbee, not Daddy's friend.
Okay.
But then they all worked for Mobil Oil for years, and the Higbees moved to Kansas City, and they were friends for years.
Okay.
And that clock that I have up above the TV, that wooden clock that strikes,
Yeah.
Higbee gave it to Daddy.
Hmm.
And when Daddy and Maureen lived in Florida, Daddy gave it to Chet and me.
I see.
So that's where he met Mother.
So she was a girlfriend of the
the-
person who ran
The daughter of the lady that ran the boarding
the
house.
boarding house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it was a place where those guys slept
And ate.
and ate before they went to work in the
Right.
oil fields. What did they do in the oil fields down there?
No, the refineries, honey.
Oh, the
They
refinery.
worked in the refineries
Okay.
where they refined it.
I wonder what they did for that.
uh, that
college grunt labor, I guess. I mean, they were just college
they
guys.
made pretty good money at it.
Yeah.
And then Mother and Daddy got married in June of this next summer.
So it went a year before they got married. Now, they went back up to Parkville to go to school, and
no, he never went
he
back to
stayed
college.
back. He stayed down there.
He never went back to college, and he regretted it all of his life. He regretted it.
Well, I mean,
But he was a smart man, a smart businessman, and a hard worker,
yeah.
and he made it. But he always regretted not having that college education.
Yeah.
I think he would like to have been a lawyer. I really do. Oh, he'd have been a good one.
So they met, but you say they eloped.
They eloped. Now, why? I don't know. Mother never really said why they eloped.
Maybe they just didn't want to go to the trouble of having the families all gather in one location and wait for weeks or months or whatever.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Another couple went with them
Yeah. Where did they elope to?
to Ponca City, Oklahoma. Not very far from Ark City. Grandma Bennett Bailey, Grandma and Grandpa Bailey took me down there one time.
What's the
for
name of the
Fourth
place?
Ponca City.
Ponca City.
Ponca City.
Arkansas.
No, Oklahoma.
Oh, Ponca City, Oklahoma.
But they had a 4th of July fireworks celebration down there. I had never seen anything like that in my whole life. I mean, lit up Popeye and all kinds of stuff, you know. I thought I died and gone to heaven. But it was not far from Ark City.
So they just went to Ponca City, got married, and then they stayed down there?
Just the weekend and came back to Ark City.
Yeah.
And they he came home then with Mother, and they took their shoes off and put them side by side, and Grandma Bennett was a terribly superstitious person. Oh, your shoes are together. Oh, you're married. And I think they denied it. I don't know how long it was before they told her.
How long was it then before they moved to to Mound City?
They went to Kansas City first, and I don't know, it wasn't long after that because the refineries closed and there was no work. And Mother had an appendectomy at St. Luke's before she was ever pregnant for me. And also gave a slice of skin to a little kid that had been burned and needed some skin, and she always had that scar there where they had taken that.
Well, that was nice of her.
It was. Mother was nice that way. She was concerned about other people. She would help others. So then she got pregnant with me, and I was born there at St. Luke's in Kansas City. And then a few months later.
Did they have their own place there then?
Oh, they had a hot apartment, little apartment. Mother said at one time all they had was a big bag of potatoes and a big sack of flour. They ate fried potatoes and biscuits.
What was Granddad doing?
Well, the only job I ever heard about, he was supposed to be selling Hoovers. And he wasn't having a whole lot of luck at selling Hoovers.
Well, this is in 30.
It's in
30.
Yeah, people didn't have any
31,
money.
32, 33.
Yeah, I was born in 32, so it was 31, 32, somewhere along in there.
Dead of the, at the end of I guess it's towards the tail end of the Depression.
Well, they didn't think of it as a tail end then.
Yeah.
So.
28 is when
it started,
29,
didn't it?
30. No, it was right in the middle of it then.
Middle of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And going door to door trying to sell Hoovers.
So he ran into a woman, I think that her Hoover, she had one but it quit working. So he took it, and I was amazed at this because I never saw my dad fix anything. And he repaired that Hoover and took it back to her, and she paid him.
Mm.
Well, that happened several times, and the company found out about it
No.
and said, no, 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 you sell him a new Hoover. Well, he didn't, so they fired him. And I think that's around then's when they went back up, went to Mound City. They weren't having any luck in Kansas City. And Daddy taught Mother to drive there in Kansas City. Just turned her loose and said, now drive. And it was on Oak Street Traffic Way, which now is a 4 or 5 lane highway. You know, it was just 2 lanes then, but full of traffic for then. And Mother said she thought she was going to have a nervous breakdown, but she learned to drive.
Do you remember at all Kansas City at that
No.
age?
No, just a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really remember Mound City either. I remember when we lived at Craig, and we lived upstairs of the Dopps, and how I loved going down with Auntie Dopp and spending time with her.
So he went back to Kansas, to Mound City, and he went to work for his dad again, or?
I don't know what he did then, or whether he was looking for work or working for Granddad. That was never really told, just that this business came up for sale in Craig, and Granddad loaned him the money to buy it.
So it was an existing business then?
It was an existing business, yes.
I see.
Yes.
Well, tell me about the relationship between Bob and Flo and what they were like when they were young marrieds.
The marriage was a little bit difficult. They were terribly different, and I think neither one wanted to compromise.
Uh-huh.
Mother was very artistic and very kind of fancy, and Daddy was that German parentage, you know, and Scottish on Granddad's side, and it didn't mesh very well. It just didn't mesh very well, and I remember my parents having lots of arguments.
Mm-hmm.
Lots. And Mother left one time when I was a junior in high school, and Daddy didn't know where she was. She just left, and he raised my allowance from $1 a week to $5 a week, and I thought that was wonderful, because I was doing the same things then as I was doing when Mother was home. But he thought I had extra work.
Hmm. And why were you doing so much of the work?
I don't know.
What kinds of things were you doing?
I did the washing, I did the ironing, I did the cleaning. On Saturdays, I had to clean the house, change the sheets on the bed, and it was a 9-room house, 2 stories. Do my hair, do Judy's hair, get lunch, some food ready for Daddy when he came home from the store, which I always had hot dogs and sauerkraut and mashed potatoes because I could hold it till he got home.
Yeah.
And I had the kitchen to clean up, the refrigerator to defrost, the floors to scrub, the front porch to sweep, the back porch to sweep. And as I said, do Judith Lee's hair, or I didn't get to have a date that night.
So this is when you were a teenager, and now Grandma took off for a while then, you say?
And then when I was a junior in high school, she took off.
How long was she gone?
About 3 months.
Did she go home?
He ended up finding her down at Wichita at Uncle Joe's and Ruby's, her brother and Ruby Bennett's.
Nobody knew where she was?
Grandma knew, but she sworn she wouldn't tell.
Grandma Bailey.
Bennett, yeah.
Or Bennett.
Bailey, whatever she was then, Bailey. And so he hired a private detective
Oh, really?
and brought her back.
Huh? So she didn't just one day show up. He had to
No.
he'd get somebody down there and bring her back.
He went down and
Oh, I
he
see.
got her.
Oh, I see. And what and how old were you then?
16. I was 17 when I graduated. I presume I was about 16.
Yeah. Well, how did you feel about that?
I was very happy those 3 months. For one thing, Daddy let me have a date in the middle of the week.
Yeah.
Mother never allowed that.
Hmm.
I got to go see Gone with the Wind over at Mound City, 4 of us
Yeah.
kids. Yeah. I had $5 a week.
Yeah.
I had a bank account. Daddy showed me how to open a bank account and write checks.
Yeah.
Everything was peaceful at home.
Hmm. So what made her so difficult?
You know, Chuck, I'm not exactly sure. I really am not exactly sure. I think there was no give in to him. And he was the type of man that he was head of the home. Well, and looking back, her dad was gone quite a bit when he worked in the oil fields, and grandmother ran that home while Lee was gone. So maybe mother picked that up. I don't know. She didn't like to be told what to do, how to do it, or when to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And even a time or two, your dad heard my dad tell mother, now this and this and this done before I get home, after we were married and they lived in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And that infuriated your dad. Infuriated him. How dare he give your mother orders like that? And she usually didn't do them. So then there was trouble, you know? And he'd say, one time he said, have Johnny Mike do da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And mother didn't. And
So what then? It takes two to tango, of course.
yes.
What was Granddad like that probably didn't help matters?
You do this and this and this. When I say it, I'm head of the house.
Yeah.
Now, to ease the final part of the story, after she was gone and after he'd married Maureen and Daddy and Chet, Daddy and Maureen and Chet and I were together there in Kansas City, and Daddy and I were walking along ahead of Chet and Maureen quite a little ways. And I don't know why Daddy said it, but he said, you know, sis, your mother and I didn't always get along like we should have. But I loved that girl. And she was good for me.
Hmm.
And I miss her. And I said, yes, Daddy, I know you do. And I said, you will see her again. Oh, he said, I wish I could believe that. I said, Daddy, I promise you, you will see Mother, you will see Johnny Mike, you'll see your parents, you'll see your grandparents, everybody you've known, you will see again, I promise you. And about that time, Chet and Maureen came up, so. But that kind of eased the feelings that I had as a kid. Now they separated. They were separated one time. You remember we went over to visit Daddy when we were going to Kansas City Steak to a New Year's Eve dance,
Yeah.
and we went to see Daddy at his apartment.
Yeah. I can't remember where it was, but it seemed like I remember seeing him in one place and Grandma was in another, or at the house.
At the house. His apartment was, it looked, you could see the river and you could see the airport, the old
Yeah.
Kansas City airport. And you could see the planes coming in and you could see the river, and it was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. It was peaceful.
Yeah.
It was good. You never knew, even back in Craig and Kansas City, you never knew what was going to start an argument.
Yeah.
You never knew.
So what was so your relationship with your mom was not great.
Not fantastic, no. Once in a while, here and there, it was, and after I was married, there were times I wanted to talk to her, and if you called each other on the phone and the phone bill went sky high, your dad and my dad had a fit because it cost so much money then.
Yeah.
Mother and I got along pretty well till Judith Lee moved back from Denver,
Yeah.
and Judith Lee took over.
Uh-huh.
She took over.
So you guys got along better after you were married.
Better.
Yeah.
And yet there were times Mother would say, well, I would do this to those kids and I would do that, you know. And it wasn't what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
If when I was through a fit, she'd throw water on us, you know. And if one of you boys threw a hissy fit, I'd throw some water on that young man and stop that. I just didn't want to do it that way, child. But I was pretty strict with you guys because I wanted my parents to approve of you.
Mm-hmm.
And one time there on Pacific, you all came in. I don't know what you two boys, you or both of you, I don't know what you were doing, but I got up, Chet and I were in the kitchen, and I said, now stop that right now. Your grandparents would, I turned around to Chet, I said, these are my kids. We're raising these kids. Hallelujah, he said. He said, I never thought I'd live to hear it. You see, he never interfered.
Yeah.
But it irritated him.
Interesting.
Yes, it was. Yeah, he said, I never thought I'd live to hear that.
So what was the difficulty with you and Granddad? Why was it so hard for you two?
The church. We really didn't have difficulty until the church.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't like the church. He didn't like Mormons, which that was the way we were raised up there in northwest Missouri.
Yeah.
I didn't like Mormons either, you know,
Yeah.
per se. It was my birthday. We were on 20th Street. And the ward was having a hayride. And I was so excited because Chet and I were going on the hayride.
Yeah.
I'd never been on a hayride.
How about that?
And Mother called, or Daddy, I don't know. They were coming up, and it was my birthday, and they were taking us out to the Hoof and Horn, and Aunt Ethel would be there with us too. I was very disappointed, but I said, okay, you know.
Yeah.
So we were at the Hoof and Horn and having a nice meal, and Chet and I and Mother and I don't know, somebody else maybe was there, maybe not. Daddy and Ethel were on the other side of the table. And it was the first time we ever voted for You know, this stuff they do that's not, that we always thought was illegal. Come on, help me.
I don't know.
Right.
Gambling?
Gambling. First time we ever voted for gambling in Missouri or St. Joe or wherever. And Daddy, almost through the meal, said, and I suppose, and he looked at me and he said, I suppose you voted against gambling today. Or yesterday, maybe it was. Well, yes, Daddy, I did. And you could tell he was upset. And Chet said, well, Bob, your vote killed her vote. He said, I didn't vote. And I've never seen your dad as angry. Never. As he was then. And he came up and he was shaking. And he said, you mean to tell me that you didn't vote and you sit there and chastise your daughter for voting against it? And I laid my hand on his knee, and Ethel knew Chet well enough. She real quickly changed the subject.
Huh. Interesting.
And I said to myself, and after they all left, they came by the house and I said, I've had it. I'm not going to listen to this stuff anymore. I've had it. And I didn't
And that was on what? We lived in what house?
on 20th. And I said, I'm not going back down anymore. I'm done. Chad said, okay. But he was angrier than I have ever seen him be. And he was shaking. And I thought when he leaned up, he was going to cross that table at Robert Hester.
How many years apart were they?
Well, Daddy was born in 1911, Chet in 1923. You do the math.
12 years apart.
Yeah.
Just 12 years difference.
Yeah.
I'm 12 years older than Rick.
And he and Aunt Jeannie were pretty close to the same age. I don't remember what year Aunt Jeannie was born in, but she and
That'd
Chet
be about right, yeah.
were pretty close to the same age. So anyway, and then Mother called. I think you and Steve were both gone, or maybe not. I don't remember. Mother called and they were getting ready to move from the hill over to Cherry Street. And she said, do you want Johnny Mike's furniture? Your dad said to see if you wanted it. I said, no, I do not want it. I said, I wanted it when Chuck and Steve were young and little. They knew their Uncle Mike and they loved him, and I would love to have had that furniture then. I don't want it, Mother. Old Kenny Moore said, boy, I'll take anything I can get, you know. That's the kind of guy he was. And I never regretted turning that furniture down. I think maybe Chris ended up with it later on for Jason and Nathan.
So for multiple years, you and Granddad didn't talk much then.
Well, from October of that year till the next Memorial Day, I guess it was. And something was said in general conference. You know, we used to get it on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Just that one session. And I don't remember, Chuck, what was said. I don't know who the general authority was, but I knew I had to apologize to my dad. And I told Chet that, and he said, apologize for what? He said, you haven't done anything. And I said, Chet, for my hard feelings.
Yeah.
I've got to do it. I know I have to do it.
Yeah.
And oh boy, I didn't want to.
Yeah.
So we were down there. Mother had invited us, and that's the first time I think we'd been to the house on Cherry Street.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all gathered, and I said, Daddy, could I talk to you upstairs for a few minutes? Yeah, he said. We went upstairs. And I said, Daddy, I've had hard feelings toward you for several months now, and I need to ask your forgiveness. Oh boy, did he hit the ceiling. On in that blankety blank church, and don't you cram that church down my throat ever. Da 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 da, you know. And when he finally stopped, I said, Daddy, I've had hard feelings against you for several months. I need to ask your forgiveness. Well, I had a little more verbiage, not as bad. And I just thought, can I do this? And yet I knew I had to, Chuck. And I said, Daddy, I've had hard feelings against you for several months, and I need to ask your forgiveness. Okay, sis, he said. After he got all of that out, okay, sis. Or we never would have had a relationship again. Never. The kids would never have known their granddad. None of them. But then when Mother died, and we were on our way home from Stevens in Canada, and he didn't wait on me to make the funeral arrangements.
Yeah.
He and Judith Lee did it.
Yeah.
And he, right before the funeral started, he said, was there anything your mother wanted? Of course, it's pretty late now to do anything different. I said, well, she wanted In the Garden sung. You probably don't know it or never heard it. It's a Protestant hymn she loved. And he said, well, yeah. I said, just ask the organist to play it, Daddy. It'll be okay. Which he did, and she did. But he was real persnickety, and Jack, I know that he knew he should have waited on me.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that.
Yeah.
But then after he and Maureen were married, things really leveled out, and he became really, I think Maureen got after him one time.
Mm-hmm.
She said, Robert, that's your oldest daughter. You need to be nicer or something, 'cause she told me about it. I don't know what was said, and he was. He was. And we never had crossword between us from then on.
Yeah.
We had good visits. He and Chet got along beautifully. He respected Chet a lot. Especially after having Kenny Moore for a son-in-law. Made Chet look like a diamond.
He didn't know how good he had it.
Yeah, that's what Chet said. So, you know, they were hard times, and yet, and when I was a kid, he'd get after me awful hard. But I would take it, and sometimes he was kind of right. Not always, but sometimes. But you just expect parents to make mistakes, you know?
Yeah. So what was Uncle Mike like when he was a little kid?
Oh, that Johnny Mike. When he was real little, he was just a darling. He was mine.
Mm-hmm.
He was mine. I raised him. Till I left home. When they moved up to Nebraska.
So was Grandma a heavy drinker when she was in Craig?
No, not that I noticed.
Yeah.
Daddy would they'd have a drink when he came home from work
Yeah.
or something,
Yeah.
or there'd be beer in the fridge. Daddy drank beer, Mother not so much. And I was permitted beer anytime I wanted it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Glass, usually, is all I ever drank. When they moved up to Nebraska from Craig, Daddy broke his ankle and he had to lease the store. He couldn't run the store anymore. And he had a friend up there in Nebraska that he'd worked with in Mobil Oil. Told him about this station for sale, this 24-hour station. Daddy went to Denver and got a contract with at least 2, maybe 3 trucking companies to stop there to refuel and to eat, because it had a restaurant with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a 24-hour thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the folks rented this house right across the road from the station. And Johnny Mike, just not long after they went up there, he went to run across the street to go to the station. Didn't look, and it was a major highway through there, Chuck.
Yeah.
And his car hit him and just tossed him like a tumbleweed down the highway, Mom said. And it, of course, caused a really bad concussion.
Mm.
He wasn't conscious for about 4 days. And just so wild they couldn't even take more x-rays to see if anything else was broken, if anything was broken. But Johnny Mike was never quite the same after that. Just not quite the same.
How old was he about then?
Oh. I'm not sure he was even in school yet. Chuck, 5, 6, maybe. I don't
And
know.
how old would you have been?
Well, I was in nurse's training,
Okay.
and I was 11 years older than him. I caught the bus. I went to the nurse's head of nurses there, Miss Lindquist, and I said, I need to go home. Well, Miss Hester, there isn't anything you can do. I said, I need to go home. I need to go home. And so I caught a bus. No, caught a train from St. Joe up to Omaha, then had to catch a bus over to Cambridge, Nebraska. So it took me all day and afternoon, whenever I left, I don't know. It took me all night and the next morning to get there. And by that time, he had regained consciousness, but was still in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor told the folks, now don't let him roust around and don't let him get hit on the head, when you take him home. And one of the truck drivers saw him out there throwing something up in the air, and he didn't catch it, but it didn't hit him on the head. And he went in and he told Daddy, and Mother,
Yeah.
that he just never was quite the same. And he got to be an ornery little Dickens. And when we lived on Pacific, folks were gone.
How old were you when you went into nursing?
17.
So he was at least 7 or 6.
6.
At least 6.
6. What did I start to say?
Well, it was something about he wasn't ever the same and got ornery and.
Oh. We lived on Pacific Street. Folks were gone that weekend, and he had a car. For a while, he had Granddad Hester's car till he tore it up. I don't know what he had then, but he made it from North Kansas City to our house in 45 minutes. And it took us an hour or so to drive it at the speed limit.
Mm-hmm.
I said, John Michael Hester. Oh, he said, sis, don't sweat it. He said, I'm not going to live to be 20 anyway. And I said, well, you don't have to take some innocent person with you. driving like that. He didn't live to be 20.
So,
But I loved a little snot.
sure. Any other, distinguishing traits or personality things about him as he was? I know you were not at home. I mean, I wouldn't know. I couldn't tell you about Rick when he was growing up.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know that you would even have any real
Well,
sense for that.
we were down there some. I know he was big in scouts, and he loved that Mikasay stuff.
Yeah.
And Mother made him feathers and all kinds
Right.
of stuff.
Yeah, we saw him perform one night. We went to one of the things that they did.
Yeah.
And he did some dances, and it
Yes.
was cool. We liked it. We thought it was pretty amazing.
Yes, he loved it, and they put a plaque down there at scout camp or something for him. When he got out of high school, he went to enlist in the Navy and took the tests or whatever they give you,
Yeah.
and he rated high. And he came home and told Mother, he said, I didn't know I could do that kind of stuff. I didn't know I could do that. Well, everybody else knew it, but Johnny Mike didn't. So he never made it to the Navy, of course.
Well, I remember. I mean, he was a great uncle. I mean, Steve
He was,
and
and he loved you two boys.
we had a great time with him. We were always happy that when he was there.
Yeah.
And I do remember he swore a lot
No, see, he didn't do that
around you.
No.
He swore in front of Grandma.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh, when he was really little, there, Craig. He had a gun. He had a gun and holster set, 2 guns, and of course he picked this up from his father. But he came in the house one day with his hands on his hips, and he says, "Where in the GD hell are my guns?" I thought you were gonna have to pick Mother up off the floor. And she said to Daddy, "Now, Robert," she said, "you need to watch your language around that child."
Yeah. Well, it does.
And yet he was a churchgoer, and he, unbeknownst to the folks, had joined the Baptist church. Went to that minister before he left on that trip. And the minister told us, he said there was never a young man any more ready to go than he was. He confessed to me all the things he'd done and prayed
Isn't that interesting?
for forgiveness.
That's remarkable, really.
It is, Jack. It is. And Mother and Daddy didn't know he'd changed churches. I knew it, but they didn't.
You know it why?
I don't remember why he told me, but I
told
knew
you.
it. Uh-huh.
He had a gorgeous girlfriend.
Yes. Janice, wasn't that her name?
Love.
Janice Love. Uh-huh.
She was so nice to us. I mean, she was nice to Steve and I. At
Yes.
least.
She was crazy about him.
Yeah, they were pretty serious, I thought.
They were, and she came up once on a weekend after he died. She came up and spent a weekend with us. She was just a really nice girl.
Yeah.
And beautiful.
Yeah, well, Uncle Mike was a handsome kid.
He was. He's a little snot.
He was a handsome kid.
When he was real little, and I was taking him over to get his hair cut one day, and he had this blonde hair and these brown eyes, and been out in the sun, and he was tanned. And I put a little play suit on him with rabbit ears on it, and he just looked adorable. And we were walking up the sidewalk, and Carolyn's great-grandma, Granny Sellers, was sitting on the front porch in the glider, and we went up to say hi to Grandma Sellers, and she said, "Oh, Johnny Mike, you look so sweet or so nice or something," and I had told him, and he says, "I know it." I could have just died. Just a little bitty guy, I know it. Oh, he was little, the apple of Daddy's eye.
Yeah,
Daddy had him over to the store often as a little tiny kid,
yeah,
and he was smart. He could pick up on that stuff, Chuck.
yeah.
But in Kansas City, things just kind of widened between them. Daddy was not home often enough.
Yeah,
He worked so late,
he worked a lot.
7 days a week.
Yeah, yeah.
He made a good living, but what it did to the family, you know?
Well, the only one home was Uncle Mike.
You know,
Right?
Judith Lee was for
Was she home for
quite a while. She was ready to start high school, I think, when they moved to Kansas City.
I see.
She hated it.
She didn't like Kansas City, yeah?
No, North Kansas City. Oh, there were rich kids there and a lot more accomplished than she was. She had quite an inferiority complex. And it just about ruined her life.
Well,
So, there was good and bad, as in all people, on grandparents and parents and everybody else. My grandma Hester, Christina, I never saw her when she wasn't walking with a cane or crutches. She had this rheumatoid arthritis.
yeah.
And yet she would go out to the garden and take a pad, and she would kneel out there and work in that garden, pull the weeds, and she just never gave up till she finally had to go to bed. She just couldn't make it anymore. And I have her photo album. Got it from John Shrout. Ethel had it. And there's pictures in there of her standing straight up. It just, and I know that's the way I'll see her someday.
Oh, yeah.
And when she died, and I was expecting Mike and had been down, you know, and folks said, "Oh, you shouldn't go," and I said, "I'm going. I want to see my grandma."
Yeah.
And so they picked me up, took me, and I think I had Chris with me. I don't know. Her hands had relaxed some, Chuck. And when Mother went up and they had done her hair, and Mother said, "Oh, no, this isn't the way her hair always looked." And she had wavy, curly hair, so did my dad when he was young. And Mother redid it, and she just looked beautiful. And I was so thankful I went up.
Oh, yeah.
And Mother took good care of her. It was after Johnny Mike died, and I had to go tell her.
I remember that. I remember standing there by her, unless I'm.
Yeah, she was in bed, and you stood there by her.
Yeah.
And that little stool that Granddad made out of horses' collars or something that was by her bedside. Christina used to stand up and see her great grandma, and that displeased Grandma so.
Well, I remember her saying, "Why would the Lord take
Why
that boy and leave me here?"
would the
Instead of
Lord
taking
leave a useless old woman like me and take a young man like that? And she wasn't useless to me, Chuck.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she felt like that. And that's the only time in my whole life I ever heard Grandma complain.
Well,
The only time. She never did.
it was understandable.
It just. And something else. When Daddy married Mother, he was still engaged to a girl in Mound City. And he had told Mother that he'd broken the engagement, but he hadn't yet. And Grandma and Grandpa were crazy about her. She was just such a fine girl, and they were a good match, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And here was Mother, they didn't know, and took him away from her, and Mother smoked, And Daddy said, now, Florence, do not smoke in front of my mother. She said, well, I have to be myself. He said, irregardless, give Mother that respect and do not smoke in front of her. Mother never did. Never did. But of course, you know, Grandma knew she smoked and blah, 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 blah. And I don't think ever had any bad words, but there wasn't any closeness there. And I know I can remember Ethel saying to me one time that she remembered Daddy coming over, talking to his parents and crying, and said, if it wasn't for Rayanne, I would leave. That's the first time I knew he cared anything about me. You know? So things never were really, really good, but Mother never talked against her, anything like that.
Yeah.
But after Johnny Mike died, and she just laid down in bed and gave it up, Mother went every week.
You're talking about Grandma.
Florence went every week to Grandma Christina's and did her nails and her toenails and her hair, things that the nursing home girls didn't do.
Yeah.
Every week. So, and Mother came to love her.
Oh, that's great.
And Grandma came to love Mother. So when Mother had this tumor and didn't want to have it operated on, because she was afraid she'd have a stroke and would be a burden to somebody. And I said, Mother, how did you feel when Grandma was down flat and you took care of her? Oh, she said, that was such a blessing. I said, then how do you know you might be denying someone else a blessing like that? So that's when she had the surgery. Daddy and Judy just kept, you will have it, you got to have it, you will have it. They didn't get any place with her. You could not approach Mother that way. And you know, Johnny Mike was the same way. Even when I was still a kid at home, Mother would go at him like that and he'd just rebel. But I could get around him. And you could if you went at him a certain way. Yeah. So that's when she had the surgery, and of course they couldn't do anything. And she said to me there at her bed when she came to, then she said to me, what did they find? And I said, Mother, they couldn't operate. I said, the gut was all wound around that tumor and they couldn't do anything. She said, then all this pain's for nothing. And I said, well, yeah, Mom, but at least you know.
Right.
You know what you have.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, there were just times like that when she was sick. She would turn to me, and then I couldn't be there the night she died. But Josie said she was unconscious anyway and didn't know. But I would like to have been there.
Sure.
But that's, you know. Now, when I went to the temple to do her work, and in the endowment session especially, she was right beside me, Chuck. I could feel her. And I looked and I thought maybe I might see her spirit. No, there was a strange sister sitting by me.
Which temple did you do that?
Salt Lake.
Salt Lake.
And she was right there. And before we went through the veil, I thought, oh, Mom, you gotta see this celestial room. It's beautiful. And she loved beautiful things like that. She was somewhat artistic. And went through the veil and she was gone. And I could feel she was gone. And the next day, when your dad your dad got back that day from Stevens, he and Mike, and we went to do the sealing for Grandma and Grandpa and have me sealed. Or no, I couldn't be sealed to Mother. Have Mother sealed to Grandma and Grandpa Bennett.
Mm-hmm.
And when we walked into the sealing room, there was this sister, the workers, you know, and with dyed black hair, which I hate dyed black hair. And I thought, she's gonna stand in for Mother. And she said when we walked in, she knew exactly what we were gonna do, and she knew she was gonna be involved in it. So Chet and I stood in for Grandma and Grandpa Bennett, and she stood in for Mother. And we talked a little bit afterwards, and I told her about my feelings the day before, and I thought when I didn't feel her anymore, I thought she's probably busy now. And I told this sister about her leaving. She said, "Oh, sister, they always leave at the Vale. They always do. They're busy. They have work to do now. They've got their endowment."
Interesting.
But that was the closest that Mother and I'd been.
Well, that's a good thing to be. That's a good place to feel that closeness.
It was.
For sure. Better than not feeling anything at all.
Oh. And Mother used to call me and say, "Now, what do you believe about so-and-so?" She had Jehovah's Witnesses working on her. And she'd call me, "What do you believe about this, you know, or that?" And I'd tell her. And I know it didn't take any time at all for her to accept the gospel.
Yeah.
And the year before Chet and I were baptized, she and Daddy went to California with the Higbees, and they stopped in Salt Lake and toured Temple Square. And she came back with the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, Jesus the Christ, and I don't know if there was another one or not. And I said, "Oh," and she said, "It wouldn't take much to make me believe this." I said, "Oh, Mother." And a year later, we were baptized. If you can believe that. Oh, Mother. But she used to call me to find out what we believed. So.
Well, we've been going an hour and a half here.
Have we really?
Hour and 32 minutes.
You and I always have been able to talk long.
I think probably that's good for today.
Yes. I've told enough.
Well, it's been
Secrets.
great, Mom. I'm so glad to learn more about our family.
Yeah, things that I don't usually tell, you know.
Well, they'll be meaningful. And,
I hope so.
to someone in the future.
In the
I gotta
future.
go pay my tithing.
You gotta go pay it? What is that?
Oh, it's a delivery. Thank you.
A delivery on Sunday?
It's the
FedEx?
Amazon.
Amazon.
It's for Judy. She shops on Sunday.
Oh, shit.
Alrighty.
Is this microphone still on, Chuck?
Oh yes. Thank you.
I see red lights.
Yeah.